Welcome back to the Bill and Doug Show. It's Tuesday evening. That means it's time to talk playoff brackets and playoff picks. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis. We do it every Tuesday, Bill. We run through what we actually think our bracket, what we think it will be at the end of the year. Like if we were betting like a 50-cent piece on this and saying like who's closer to getting this right at the end of the year. That's what we try to do. And again, some shifts this week. And I just want you to know that I went through and I made a pick that I think a lot of people will raise their eyebrows at, but I worked it out. And it's not only rationalization, it's actually ball talk.
All right. Love it. Can't wait to see it.
We would invite you to like, to subscribe, to tell a friend about the Bill and Doug Show. And I also want to just get something off my chest here right off the top, Bill. So I've been getting just a little bit of pushback from some of the fine folks, some of the loyal people who have put me in this position in my career that I can just chill out a little bit on the SEC stuff. Like they think they're getting enough of it. What do you think?
Really? It seems like the people like when you get out the sword and get out the hat and push back on the SEC.
So here's the thing. So I did my rant show on Tuesday. I did that graphic about who I think is mid and who's fired and everything for the top 25. It has like 700,000 impressions on social media, and I got to do a show about that. Like I saw free. Sure. That's just Twitter. That's Twitter making money off my genius. Yeah. Right. So, but I'm just going to try to keep it. I'm just going to keep it just a little like be a pro today. I'm going to be a pro and talk ball.
Be a pro. Okay. All right. We'll see.
But I also figured out a way for everybody in the SEC to finish with 3 losses. But as a pro, I did that.
Now we're talking.
We want to talk about Iowa because we were just drastically wrong about the Iowa-Minnesota game.
Maybe the most wrong we've been about anything this year. I think you and I both said Minnesota's a better team. What are we doing here? What's up with this spread?
8.5. Why is this 8.5
to 3?
Line should have been Iowa minus 30. We do want to talk about Iowa. I do want to talk about. Do you think Ole Miss is basically in the playoff at this point?
Yeah, because they kind of have to lose twice to not be, and I don't know if that's going to happen.
Yeah, I think they're eminently capable of that because like they've had a bunch of close calls this year and they had a screwy game last year, but their schedule's pretty easy and they just beat Lane Kiffin just got his first ranked win on the road as a coach in the SEC. So like that's meaningful. And like I couldn't ignore that anymore. So I finally I have Ole Miss, I think, in my playoff I guess I had it in a couple weeks ago, but I did not have them in last week and I have them in now kind of reluctantly. But like we're getting to that point of the season, right? Where as we know, a week from now on this Tuesday, there will actually be an actual show from the College Football Playoff Committee. The actual first rankings will come out. And you and I will come on and give our thoughts about the playoff and then react to that. But like we're getting to that point where there's a couple teams who can really think like they're in really good shape at the moment.
Yeah. I don't know. Clearly, the ones like at the top, certainly, but even a team like Ole Miss, right? Because my thing on Ole Miss was, well, they're not going to win both their games against Georgia and Oklahoma, or I thought they would lose both those games. Excuse me. And then it's like they also have like an Egg Bowl loss in them. They do. But now it's like even if they have an Egg Bowl loss in them, it might not matter. So it's starting to take shape a little bit, but there's still a pretty decent amount of unknown, I think, as we go into November.
Something's going to happen. We always just and I've been doing this for 20 years and I still catch myself. It's like, well, if everything goes away, it's like, no. If you're starting a sentence in late October regarding college football that begins with, well, if everything goes the way you think, just end your sentence because that's already you're wrong. It's not going to go the way you think. There are going to be upsets that are going to affect this playoff bracket. But preseason, Bill, I thought there was a chance there was going to be a bloodbath at 9-3 for a couple playoff spots. I actually think we're inching closer to nobody at 9-3 gets in.
Yes, I started to come around to that like a week or two ago as I started kind of gaming out some records that I think maybe there could be an opportunity for a couple of the SEC teams at 9-3 to get in, perhaps, but no, it feels more and more like we're looking at a bunch of 11-1s, 10-2s, and if not some 12-0s.
Okay, so let's before we don't have to rush into our picks here. We did complete the circle of death last week in the Big Ten, which was Illinois beating USC, USC beating Michigan, Michigan beating Washington, and then finishing it last weekend was Washington beating Illinois. So those 4 teams all beat each other, and they all won at home, right? So it's like not a shock there, but like that's a little bit. You've kind of been on that at times this year, that kind of thing could maybe wind up not being great for the Big Ten. I thought that was a really impressive win by Washington, and I continue to like Washington, and I continue to believe in Washington. But do you think that reality of 4 teams that I think make up a really good second tier in the Big Ten, all doing that to each other, could in the end be not the best?
Yeah, you want to see, I think for the Big Ten's purposes anyway, you want to see one of those teams kind of emerge from that for group, and it didn't really happen. It's not dissimilar, though it's not entirely the same thing of like there's this round robin of Indiana, Oregon, and Iowa, right? And Indiana obviously won both of its games there, so like they kind of vaulted themselves ahead of that, right? And I guess we'll see what happens between Oregon and Iowa in a couple of weeks. We'll talk about that. But yeah, that didn't happen with that group of teams, and doesn't mean they're not good. It means they're not discussed properly, and it also means they might not make the playoff, which is like kind of a bummer for the Big Ten.
So let's talk about Iowa. Both Iowa and Oregon are off this week, as is Washington. And then in 2 weeks, Oregon is at Iowa, and that's going to be a banger. And I'll be like a big noon should probably be there. Although I guess you could. It's be a great game. That's Oregon is 7-1 and Iowa is 6-2, and they're both off this week. They're not going to lose. Like that's a gigantic showdown for playoff implications. And we do not have to define great games by whether Urban Meyer and Mark Ingram show up to do a pregame show there. It's a great game no matter what. Brady Quinn's here. Now it's big. That's not how this works. It's already big.
Oh, Indiana Penn State's also that day. I wonder if Big Noon might still go to that.
The hard thing is that Penn State stinks. So I don't know. But yes, you might be right.
Oh, also BYU. Oh, wait, maybe has it already been BYU Texas Tech is that weekend, and it's at noon. They might be going there.
Okay, but they are.
Which I actually think is good for us because I said to you before we started recording, that's the day that Ohio State plays Purdue at 1:00 in the afternoon. I would prefer that Oregon and Iowa is at night so we can watch it.
Oh, that would be great. That would be really fun. That'd be a great one for NBC. Also, but Big Noon is, I think, going to Cincinnati, Utah this week. So I don't know if they do. I mean, if the Big 12 deserves it, there's a bunch of bangers in the Big 12 coming down the pike too. So sure. I'm trying to figure out what to think about BYU and Cincinnati, who I think are just both really good, but I am having a hard time like getting all the way there on some stuff. So like BYU and Cincinnati deserve our attention, but Iowa has quite a thing here coming up. Iowa is off this week. Go ahead.
Sorry. That just while we're talking about it, that game will not be at night because Notre Dame Navy is on NBC that night. So that's either going to be noon or 3:30.
Notre Dame Navy, which is also a banger for some playoff stuff because Navy is currently one of the undefeated teams in the American, although obviously it's a non-conference game. But Navy could knock Notre Dame out of the playoff race in South Bend that night. Holy mama, that'd be a thing. Oh. Iowa off this week to end the season. Home Oregon, at USC, home Michigan State, at Nebraska. So as we sit here thinking about Big Ten teams in the playoff race, Indiana and Ohio State are 8-0, Oregon 7-1. Iowa, Michigan, Nebraska, and Washington are 6-2, and USC is 5-2. That's who's in it. So they're like these 3 teams at the top of the Big Ten, and there's 5 teams that still have 2 total losses. And Iowa is one of those teams, and they're playing a 1-loss team in Oregon, and then they're playing 2 of the other 2-loss teams in USC and Nebraska. That is a big ask of of Iowa to get through that. That they are 6-2 is a great credit to them, and they almost beat Indiana at home, which would make them 7-1. And I do think that like one of their strong, like that should be the kind of thing that should be getting them respect because Indiana is throttling everybody, and Indiana had to score in the final 2 minutes to win in Kinnick. So Iowa deserves a lot of respect. But when you are thinking about this playoff race, how much are you thinking about the Hawkeyes right now?
I thought about them because the other thing I thought too was like, well, let's say. It's not an Iowa that is 9-3 with like say they get Oregon and USC then lose one of those other 2, but it's like not. It's just like a close game when they kind of lose. That's a pretty compelling 9-3 too. So I thought about it.
I think that would have to include an Oregon win.
I think they would have to beat Oregon and USC for them to
Okay.
like us even like consider the notion of 9-3 Iowa having playoff considerations. But yeah, I definitely thought about them because even like their 2 losses currently are right combined 8 points, right? They lost on the road in the rivalry game to Iowa State, which is not a bad team, and the Indiana game, as you said, was close.
But it's also not great. Like Iowa State's lost its last 3. Iowa State could be staring down the barrel of 7-5. So like I do
Yeah,
think
but they're
that
a little
loss
banged up
is
too,
not
aren't
great.
they?
They are. They've been banged up in the secondary for sure.
Yeah, I don't know if that'll
And
come
they've
in.
lost some close games. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying like they're great, but it's not losing by 3 in a rivalry game is not the worst loss in the world
Agree.
on the road. So I'm thinking about them. Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, I don't have them in. I just think like that the Oregon game is too much of a sort of pivot point for me to just assume they're going to win that game. I think they can win that game. But I kind of wanted to wait to see that happen before I started to really consider putting Iowa in my bracket. But they're definitely on the list of teams that I sort of like had on the side of like, do I want to do this now or wait?
Yeah, I do. And then like Oregon and then at USC is quite a thing because USC at home is that's going to be a great we saw what they did to Michigan. That's an ask.
That is an offense that I think on the right day is the best in college football against a defense that is one of the probably 8 best in college football.
So USC, they're done with their buys. They have 5 games left. They are 5-2 right now. USC at Nebraska, Northwestern, Iowa, at Oregon, UCLA. Did you think seriously about USC in a playoff bracket at the moment?
Yes, but similar. Like I have more had USC like a 9-3.
Okay.
So like they're sort of in there, but not a team I thought about actually putting in my top 12. No, like kind of on the periphery. Yeah.
So I do think like Nebraska as a 2-loss Big Ten team just feels like they just have too many holes.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I just like that's like a team discussion. It's like I don't think Nebraska is good enough to go 10-2. Michigan is good. I think like, I did my little graphic this week of like who's mid and who's bad and who's fired. And I did not have Michigan as mid. I don't think Michigan is mid. I think they had a young quarterback go on the road at Oklahoma and they lose that game at Oklahoma. I thought, again, what is as good of an offense in the country in USC kind of gashed him a little bit, but like to beat Washington at home, I thought was like a really good win. I think they still I think they continue to improve, but it's just hard. Like there's just a giant asterisk with Michigan that I don't think I don't know. Is Michigan with 9-3? No, they're not in. They have to beat Ohio State to get in at this point. If they only had 1 loss so far,
they're not in at 9-3.
So they have to beat Ohio State. And it's like, are they going to beat the number 1 team in the country? And like we are, yeah, maybe they are for the 5th straight time. Absolutely, they might. But I can't sit and like put Michigan in a playoff bracket because I'm assuming a win over Ohio State in that scenario, and I can't get there at the moment.
Neither can I. So no, I don't have them in. I didn't really consider them because of that. Also in like my current projections, I have like USC at 9-3. I have USC and Michigan with the same record, 9-3, 7-2, but USC won the head-to-head, so like they'd be in ahead of Michigan.
Yeah, and so then like Iowa and USC, I think are good. I just think it's too much. Their schedules are too much. That Iowa has 3 tough games. Oregon, they play each other, so they're going to like knock each other out, right? Because it's just 3 losses probably not going to get you in. So
has there been enough with Oregon though to like losing to Indiana the way that they did and then dorking around with Wisconsin the way they just did? Do you view Oregon as any more vulnerable to losing to USC, to Iowa, to Washington than he did prior, like 2 weeks ago, coming off the Penn State game?
Probably yes. And the idea again, like so we talked about this. A lot of this Big Ten stuff is going to run through Oregon, but like I'm not assuming anything. Oregon has to play Iowa and USC and Minnesota and Washington yet. Like I'm not really assuming anything with Oregon. Well, I take that back.
I'll assume a Minnesota one. Yeah.
But like I think they will beat Iowa and USC, but I'm not like dismissing the idea of it, right? But like at the moment, I still have Oregon a little bit of a cut above. I think Indiana's freaking good. And they have a little bit of a thing with Wisconsin. That's like 2 years in a row that Wisconsin really gave Oregon a game. And it could just, you talked a lot about Wisconsin's defensive front. I think it could just be like a matchup thing that of all the things in the world, a Big Ten program that is on fire and a Big Ten program that is competing at the top of the sport actually just might be a weird matchup that Wisconsin knows how to like give Oregon trouble. But I'm like, I don't think I'm faded on Oregon at all. And my belief that they are a team that still could win the national championship and that I wholeheartedly will believe will be in the playoff. I don't think my mind on Oregon has changed.
No, my mind hasn't changed on them getting to the playoff necessarily. And it's worth mentioning that between the Indiana game and the Wisconsin game, they blew Rutgers' doors off.
Yes.
50s, it was like 42-0 at halftime. Not that Rutgers is great, but it's like they had their stuff together in that game on the road going to the East Coast. I just think Oregon's interesting because of the remainder of that schedule and the fact that I think they could drop one more game. And it's just like, well, then who's that to? Because then, like, because Iowa, USC, Washington all theoretically are still alive.
Right.
So it's like if one of those three teams does in fact get Oregon, Oregon will still get in at 10-2, I think. But then then you open the door for one of those other three teams.
Right.
Depending on who it is who beats them.
Let's finish the Iowa discussion. This is a continuing thing of, and again, you made note of it, the Parker Fleming graphic about offensive efficiency and defensive efficiency. I think we've talked about it before, but Iowa is very efficient on both sides of the ball. That is not new defensively. It is kind of new offensively. I certainly was like, well, they've been efficient offensively because their quarterback runs. He's still not like has games where he doesn't throw for 100 yards. And they just absolutely blitzed Minnesota, and I don't want to hand that over only to a blitz. There's certainly sometimes you just get got, and like everything went wrong for Minnesota in that game. But also Iowa made everything go wrong, and it was sort of like a three areas of the game where Iowa just dominated what I still think is a pretty good Minnesota team. So, like, are you there on the Iowa offense in a way that you could look at Iowa finishing the season against Oregon, USC, Michigan State, Nebraska, and think, yeah, I actually think Mark Gronowski and a great offensive line and a couple skill guys who are coming along, I think they could have enough offensively to actually do this.
I'm not all the way there. No. I think if you look at Mark Gronowski's last couple games, like you see an uptick in completion percentage. He threw a touchdown pass last week to Reese Vanderzee. That was like an incredible catch. Vanderzee's been hurt for a lot of the year. He's like kind of getting back into it. So it's like, can he elevate their passing attack at all? Like it is by far the most functional Iowa passing attack we've seen in quite some time, probably in like 5 years or so. But even then, like it's still not very good. They're like 124th in the country in passing efficiency. I don't want to overstate what it is. But I think it is more complimentary of their run game than they've had in quite a while. And I think you can keep an open mind to the idea of it continuing to improve as Gronowski gets a little more comfortable and adjust to the speed of playing at this level as opposed to the FCS level, and they get healthier at receiver. Like I could see it improving marginally from where it's at right now to being slightly more functional. And then the run game's good and the offensive line's great. So, I don't think we'll ever say like, boy, that Iowa passing offense is pretty good, but we might say it's good enough at some point with everything else they have. I'm not quite there yet, but I do think it's possible because it's hard to ignore some of the advanced metrics, right? Like SP Plus is a top 50 offense. Again, it's not great, but this was like a bottom third offense not that long ago. FEI, they're the number 60 offense. CFB Graphs, which is like EPA per play, they're 54th on offense. So, not the profile of a team that's going to win a national championship, but it might be a profile of a team that can win 10 games. And if they do, they're going to get to the playoff.
There is an early line on Oregon, Iowa, since they're not either of them playing this week. Do you want to guess what it is?
Oregon minus 9.5.
6.5.
Okay.
So so this is because I was just going to say, whatever we think next week, I don't know that we'll do a big game breakdown on Iowa, Oregon, but I think when we do our picks next week, not this week, we'll get into some detail on Oregon, Iowa. And I would imagine both of us will be thinking about that game as like, this is a game. Iowa could win this.
Yeah. I already think that. Yeah.
I would not have thought that before the year. So that's different than picking Iowa to do it, but that's where we are with Iowa. So again, I just let's like make sure we're giving enough credit to some of these middle pack Big Ten teams. Before we get to our actual picks, a couple reminders: like, subscribe, tell a friend about the Bill and Doug Show. If you're sitting here and you're like, I'm not subscribed, just go ahead and do it right now so you don't miss anything that we're doing, whether it's national college football, Northern college football, Big Ten football, whether it's our Ohio State coverage. You'll be locked in for everything. And then we'd remind you to visit our friends at Roback.com, RHOBACK.com. BAD20 is the code to use to get 20% off your first order. Go check out their game day collection. Just a bunch of cool stuff. This will become the thing that is like your coolest, highest quality piece of gear within your collection for the team that you love, right? So BAD20 will get you 20% off your first order. I looked at odds to make the playoff for SEC teams and Big Ten teams. Ohio State was not on the board because like they don't want to let you bet on. I will bet $1 million on Ohio State to make the playoff to make $100 because like they don't even want to give you that opportunity. So Ohio State is so locked in the playoff that it's not even there. So they're the heaviest favorite of the SEC and the Big Ten to make the playoff. Here's the next group. There are Ohio State plus 6 other teams that are minus money, which is like you are odds-on favorites to be a college football playoff team right now. Indiana is minus 8,000, which is you may as well take them off the board. It's like I bet $8,000 on Indiana to make the playoff to win $1. And then I went to the store and I could buy nothing with $1. You can buy like 4 bananas, maybe 3.5 bananas. So like,
why does that exist? for who's doing that?
Please don't do it. Please don't be like, I love Indiana so much. It would just be so hilarious. Like, please don't do it because whatever, if a kangaroo gets loose and kicks Kurt Tignetti and Fernando Mendoza and Elijah Surratt and Aiden Fisher and Mikal Kamara and D'Angelo Pons in the head this week, and they're all knocked out for the season by getting kicked in the head by the kangaroo, you just lost $8,000 on your funny bet to win $1. Please don't do it. Minus 8,000. Texas A&M minus 4,500. So very, very favored to make the playoff. Alabama minus 1,200. Georgia minus 375. Ole Miss minus 325. Oregon minus 300. So that is, and then again, Ohio State, as we said, is off the board. So that's 7 teams overall, 4 in the SEC and 3 in the Big Ten, Bill, who are just like overwhelming favorites to make the playoff at this junction. Does that seem appropriate to you?
Yes, those are the team. I guess with the exception of Ole Miss, like, and you with Alabama, I suppose. the teams you most consistently find in most people's playoff projections. They have to be in everybody's by this point, I would think. And if you just look at how they position themselves in their remaining schedule, it's really hard to envision a scenario where they would not get in, barring something catastrophic.
Saying this only as a professional ball knower who takes the game very seriously, do you feel like Alabama was absolutely handed a win by South Carolina last week?
Yes. It was pick 6, right? And then the
pick 6 on a play that Alabama didn't do anything. It was a swing pass in the flat, and the South Carolina running back went whoop and popped it up in the air right to an Alabama guy who ran it back. It wasn't a great defensive play.
And then the Lenora Sellers fumble in a pretty advantageous area of the field for that to happen. Yeah.
And also just like allowing Alabama to drive and get the 2-point conversion to tie the game to begin with.
How about just how impressive and gritty it was for Jeremy Bernard to score when they let him do it? And Joe Tessitore was like talking about it like it was the greatest athletic feat he's ever seen. It's like, they let him score, right?
Just congratulations to the Tide. Just really proud. Yeah. Really proud. So those 7 teams, here's the rest of the SEC and the Big Ten. Vanderbilt is plus 110. So pretty basically even odds to make the playoff. Tennessee plus 290, Texas plus 390, Oklahoma plus 540. So if you'll notice there, that is now 8 SEC teams we're talking about and 3 Big Ten teams as like the most likely to make the playoff here. So I'm just noting that as a professional. USC plus 710, Michigan plus 980, Missouri plus 1040, Iowa plus 1300, so 13-1, Washington 14-1 plus 1400, LSU 25-1 plus 25-1. Just if they made the playoff without Brian Kelly, I almost would root for LSU now to make the playoff without Brian Kelly. That I could get behind. I'm in favor of that. Some of this is like, well, they know they're not saying they think that the betting odds are saying they think 8 different SEC teams are going to make the playoff. It's just like some of those SEC teams are going to beat each other and just shake out a certain way. I do think there are some undervalued Big Ten teams in there still in that mix.
Yeah, I think is Vanderbilt Texas like this week? Like that feels like almost like an elimination game. Not quite.
Yes.
It is for Texas, not quite for Vanderbilt, but
yes, at Texas. Yep.
Yeah. So yes, I agree with you that there are some undervalued Big Ten teams. And I don't even know that it's wrong necessarily to have those SEC teams ahead of those Big Ten teams, but the gap in the odds, it seems a little obvious.
So why don't I go ahead and give you my picks here, and you can we can react to them. Does that sound good? Okay. That sounds good?
Sounds great.
All right. My 1 seed, this is what I think will be the case at the end of the year. Trying to think ahead. Ohio State, the 1 seed, Texas A&M, the 2, Indiana, the 3, Miami, the 4. That has not changed for me from last week. I still think Miami will make the ACC title game and win the ACC. And I do think I'm at the point. I mean, like I like Texas A&M again. Look, I've liked Texas A&M for a while. Like I'll be curious to see where you have Texas A&M. I think Texas A&M has looked good. I have Alabama as the 5 seed, which is what I had last week. I am still open to Alabama losing along the way here at some point, but also I've thought they've been in danger of losing for 5 straight weeks, and I have to deal with reality. I have Georgia Tech as the 6, Notre Dame as the 7, Texas Tech as the 8. I gave in on Ole Miss as the 9 seed, and I don't love it. And I do think Ole Miss is still there for the taking, but as we sort of noted with their schedule, I'm just not exactly sure who's going to take them. But Mississippi State and the Egg Bowl at the end of the year is certainly one of them, and they're eminently capable of screwing up somewhere else too. Here's where it gets interesting. I have Washington as the 10 and Oregon as the 11. And then I have South Florida as the 12, because even though South Florida lost to Memphis last week, I still think they can make the American title game. They play Navy in the regular season. Navy is undefeated. Tulane is undefeated in the American. I think South Florida and Tulane don't play, but I think if South Florida wins out, which is what I'm projecting at this point, and then wins the American, I think they're in. Mm-hmm. Washington 10 and Oregon 11 is Washington beating Oregon in the last game of the regular season, and both those teams finishing at 10-2.
Yep.
And that's where I started to go through and be like, is this a bloodbath at 10-2? How do you figure this out? And then I went through, and I think you really I got Vanderbilt to 3 losses without being a crazy person, because Vanderbilt already has 1 loss. I had them losing to Texas this week, and then I had them losing at Tennessee in the last game of the regular season. I have Georgia with 3 losses without being a lunatic. I have Georgia losing to Texas, and I have Georgia losing to Georgia Tech at the end of the year. Mm-hmm. I have Texas with 3 losses without being a lunatic, because Texas already has 2 losses. I now have them getting their stuff together a little bit, beating Vanderbilt, beating Georgia, but then losing to Texas A&M in the last game of the regular season. So I got those 3 SEC teams to 3 losses, and then I have Tennessee at 2 losses, and Tennessee would have the win over Vanderbilt, but I just think Oregon, with what they're going to go through, and again, if you think USC finishes pretty good, if you think Iowa finishes pretty good, I think a couple of these Oregon wins will stack up. Basically, I think what I got to is sort of like a 10-2 showdown between Oregon and Tennessee for the last spot in the playoff, and I gave the Ducks the edge there. But Washington would be in over Oregon because they would have beaten them head-to-head and also be 10-2. And when we think about Washington, I just think Washington is... It's partly schedule driven. It's also partly driven by when they're on, they are on, man. And they get Oregon at home at the end of the year. But they're off this week, and then they're at Wisconsin, Purdue, at UCLA. So they have like an easy schedule. They play 3 of the bottom teams in the Big Ten, and then they get Oregon at home in a rivalry game to end the regular season. And at the moment, I have now decided I think Washington's going to win that game. I've kind of been thinking all along they could, but I'm officially there. And then we now enter the thing which you have brought up is, are we sure Oregon's in at 10-2? I wouldn't bet my life on it, but I could see them winning a battle with a better schedule than people realize. Losses to 2 playoff teams in this scenario, and then we really dig in on some of the 2-loss survivors in the SEC, and do they really have a better resume than Oregon does?
In that entire scenario you laid out, I took a second to consider a 9-3 Texas that has wins against Georgia and Vanderbilt, and 2 of its losses are probably to the top 2 teams in the country. Ohio State and A&M. Like that team might be in.
You think Texas? That's where we get into, because again, the discussion last year, it was a 9-3 SEC team against an 11-1 Big Ten team. So now, and it's like, hey, the Big Ten won that battle, but that scenario. But the hard thing is, like, Texas has also looked really bad at times along the way. They should have lost to Kentucky, right? So it's like this is partly them getting their stuff together, as you said, and then it's like, we're valuing wins over Georgia and Vandy. Clearly, those teams are good, but like, are we sure that's a better resume than Oregon? It's an interesting conversation. I mean, and I think you're right to bring up something like that, because the committee would certainly have that discussion for sure.
Yeah, and it would depend too along the way. Like, I thought the second half against Mississippi State was probably the best half of football that Arch Manning has played this year, and he got knocked out. And got knocked out at the end of the game. But if he starts playing better. If he starts playing better and they beat Vanderbilt and they beat Georgia and they beat Arkansas, and then they just play like a really good game against A&M at home and lose, I don't know, man. I think that team's in. I just don't know that they're leaving that team out. Now, there were a lot of ifs in there. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I wouldn't feel super comfortable as a 10-2 team compared to a team like that at 9-3.
But we're also getting to the point, like, I'm using Texas to knock out Vanderbilt and knock out Georgia. So if Texas doesn't do that and Texas gets knocked out, then it's like, okay, then Vandy or Georgia is a 2-loss team, and now do they have would they get in ahead of Oregon, right? So this is it is fraught. It is fraught for that team. But I think of all the 10-2 teams, I don't think it should. And if Oregon didn't make it in on the resume, then that's fine. I would not swing a sword about that. But I just think of all the potential 10-2 Big Ten teams, like Oregon probably has the best chance because they're Oregon.
Yeah, and it would have. I wonder how the committee would discuss Oregon beating Penn State at the time that they did, right? Is that still valued, or does it get totally downgraded because of what happened to Penn State after the fact? I don't know. But then Oregon would still have what I think will end up being a very good win against Iowa and a good win against USC. So it's like Oregon does not have an empty resume in that scenario, but. Yeah, that would get pretty heated, I think.
We're having a discussion of are we sure that wins over Iowa and USC aren't better than wins over Vanderbilt and Georgia? Why are wins over Vanderbilt and Georgia better than that, right? The Iowa team that we just talked about that might have 9 wins and took Indiana to the wire, and Oregon went into their place and beat Iowa. Isn't that a great win? So that's the kind of thing that, again, is part of this. I really do think the committee does a pretty decent job. I don't think they get caught up in the perception that affects the AP poll and that kind of thing. But this is what we're talking about. This is where I think there's going to, we'll see what the committee does a week from now. But there's going to be, I think, end up being some really intense 10-2 debates for these last 2 spots, right?
I think there will be. And I'll put this in here now. So I told you I looked this up before we did the show. CFP graphs, you can make theoretical matchups and then put them on a neutral field. Again, it's just EPA per play. It's not the end all be all, but I just was curious. By their numbers, on a neutral field, Iowa would be favored against Ole Miss, Vandy, and Missouri. And in the ESPN FPI, which again, I don't love, but ESPN runs the playoff. Vandy 17, Oklahoma's 18, Missouri's 19, and Iowa's 20. So they're kind of all grouped together there. So again, it's how do you value a hypothetical win for anybody against Iowa? My answer would be the same way you would value one against Vandy or Oklahoma or Missouri in the SEC. But that's not the discussion that's being had right now.
Yeah. Okay. So my changes were I put Ole Miss in, I put Washington in, I dropped Georgia out, and I dropped Oklahoma out. What's your 12 playoff teams, Bill?
Yeah, Ohio State is still 1 for me. I do have A&M 2. I move them up as well. Okay. I have Indiana 3 as a Big Ten runner-up. I'm still on Georgia Tech as the ACC champ in the 4 spot. Alabama 5, Texas Tech 6 is a Big 12 champ. I might be a little now that I'm looking at it, I could be a little off on my seating, so I apologize if that's the case. But Georgia 7,
Okay.
Oregon 8, Miami 9,
Okay.
Ole Miss 10,
Okay.
Notre Dame 11,
Hmm.
and then I put Tulane in now as the
Tulane.
G6 team in the 12th spot.
Okay. Okay. So I think we have, like, in your head, do you have a Georgia result? Do you think Georgia Tech beats Georgia?
Yes, that's why I have them in the 4 spot. Yeah.
But then are you thinking to yourself
that's
that's a 10-2 Georgia team?
Let me look at my projections here now that you're asking me. Yeah, 10-2 Georgia. Yeah. So
Okay.
Georgia, beating Florida, Mississippi State, Texas, and Charlotte, then losing to Georgia Tech.
Okay. So you have Georgia in, and I don't, and I think that's the only thing that I have. You have Georgia, I have Washington. I think is our only disagreement here. And then Tulane versus South Florida. This American thing is going to shake itself out. Like, it's great. It's great fun, great games. Navy's absolutely in that mix. I mean, I'm not particularly sure why we're not both saying Navy right now. But Tulane and Navy are the two teams that are undefeated in conference play on the American. Navy is still undefeated overall. Tulane's only losses to Ole Miss, and Tulane has a win over Northwestern. That, like, Northwestern's 5-3. Like, Northwestern's a decent team, and Tulane blew their doors off in the opener in New Orleans. So
Navy's got to kind of run the gauntlet though in the East. Navy's got to play North Texas, USF, and Memphis,
and then squeezing a Notre Dame game in between. Right? Yeah.
Did you, by the way, I put this in our Substack chat as it was happening on Saturday when Alabama looked like it might lose to South Carolina. Kalen DeBoer at Alabama is 7-1 against ranked FBS teams and 5-4 against unranked FBS teams, which is just like insane. But that's just the way of saying, like, they're the dorkiest, aroundiest team in the country, and that's what the rest of their schedule is, kind of, right? So they don't play at their best in games like that, and I just think, like, it's like, I guess I would say this, like, if they lose to LSU, I wouldn't be surprised, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
They play LSU, Oklahoma, Auburn.
Yep, and South Carolina is exactly that kind of team. South Carolina's 3-5. South Carolina lost to Vanderbilt, Missouri, LSU, and Oklahoma, and they should have beaten Alabama. So, like, I think that is, that's why I certainly don't completely trust Alabama. But then it's like, well, if they get in the playoff, they're not playing unranked teams; they're playing all good teams, and he has a good record against good teams. Yeah. So, I do think, again, like the Big 12 thing, you and I are both just leaning still on Texas Tech. I'm not sure we have a great reason for that. Like, I've been slow to come around probably on BYU, and I'm not sure why. They're 8-0 for the second consecutive year. Kalani Sitake is amazing. They lost their quarterback. They're starting a true freshman at quarterback, and they are 8-0. So why don't we have, but it's also one of those things, like, it's going to get figured out because BYU is off this week and then they play Texas Tech. So then we'll probably just have the winner of that game as our Big 12 champ for now until they play Cincinnati. So, like, the three teams that, Texas Tech has one loss. You and I keep putting them there as the Big 12 champ, but the two undefeated teams in the Big 12 are Cincinnati and BYU, and BYU plays both Texas Tech and Cincinnati before the end of the year. So this stuff's going to get figured out. Yeah. But credit to BYU.
No, yeah, for sure. So it's mostly a byproduct of just, like, I'm not sure, so I guess I'll just keep putting Texas Tech in there. Yeah. If you look at the teams at the top of the Big 12, BYU, Cincinnati, Houston, Texas Tech, BYU plays 2 games against those teams. Cincinnati plays 1. Texas Tech plays 1. Houston doesn't play any. So, like, Houston plays TCU, which is like a 2-loss team in the Big 12, which I think is pretty good, but Houston might actually have, like, the best path to the Big 12 title game among those teams. I could see anybody getting there. Like, I truly just have kind of no idea who's going to play in the Big 12 championship. If it, like, I think all 4 of those teams could be there. Cincinnati's got a couple bangers. Cincinnati plays BYU, Utah, and TCU. So they'll earn it if they get there.
Cincinnati BYU this week is awesome. Like that's like Cincinnati
Utah. At Utah,
That's what I mean.
Night
At
game,
night
10
this week.
15.
Yeah, like watch that. That's going to be a great game.
Yeah.
And it's going to be one of those like so Texas Tech beat Houston. That's Houston's Big 12 loss. So Texas Tech would have the tiebreaker against Houston. But like if it's like Texas Tech gets tripped up against somebody and then it looks like the Big 12 title game is probably Houston versus the BYU Cincinnati winner. And there might be a lot of people thinking like, man, Texas Tech's the best team in the Big 12 and they're not in the Big 12 title game. But no offense to the Big 12, I doubt that a 10-2 Big 12 team that's not in the championship game is going to make the playoff. So,
no, I don't think so.
Like Texas Tech is on one. Like Texas Tech has no room for error, no matter how impressive they've looked at various times this year. So
they just lost Baron Morton, their starting quarterback, had not been playing, and Will Hammond, his backup, was playing, but then he got hurt. Now he's out for the year, I think, and Baron Morton's coming back. So there's some weird quarterback stuff happening at Texas Tech.
Yeah. So anyway, those are our playoff ideas for now. We'll have them again next week, but then like again, we're trying to project what we actually think it will be at the end of the year. And once the first playoff committee rankings come out, that will affect how we think, Bill, because if we're doing something and, if Oregon's 4th next week because Ohio State's 1 and Indiana's 3 and they think Oregon is awesome, like that will affect how we think. Then it's like, oh, could a 10-2 Oregon get in? It's like, yeah, I think a 10-2 Oregon would probably be in great shape. They seem to love Oregon. Or if Washington's 23rd, and then it's like, oh, like, you know what I mean? So like our minds will change to some degree based on what the committee does.
Yeah, no, they will. It is just kind of interesting. There's no like Cincinnati, Utah, like I said, is like a huge game, and like Oklahoma plays Tennessee, but there's not a lot of bangers among like the teams we think could be in the playoff. Vanderbilt, Texas. So like the Oregon and Iowa, and I think to some extent Ohio State, even though Ohio State does play Penn State, have sort of like made their cases already for their first initial playoff ranking. So I'm interested to see what kind of move the teams that do play games of note this weekend could make.
Because like Ohio State, Penn State's supposed to be the banger. We knew this all year. It's like, oh, Ohio State, Penn State. They often, not always, but often play on Halloween weekend, and that's right before the first playoff rankings come out. Like that's going to be a huge thing. And then it's like we know what happened with Penn State, so here we are.
USC Nebraska's Friday or Saturday night too.
Oh, okay. We got so there are a couple like Vanderbilt, Texas. To your point, is kind of an eliminator, and USC Nebraska is kind of an eliminator. So like this is where we are, that we can legitimately look at some games like this, and like just like we said last week, Illinois Washington wasn't an eliminator. Illinois is not making the playoff.
They are not.
Nebraska Northwestern was an eliminator. Northwestern's not making the playoff, and Minnesota Iowa was an eliminator. Minnesota's not making the playoff. We didn't talk about any of those 3 teams this week because they're all 3 lost teams, and the 2 lost teams that won those games we did talk about because they're still alive. All right, That's it. We do it every Tuesday, but next week, and I'm a little frustrated. I mean, I'm always frustrated by this because God forbid that college football, the second most popular sport in America, actually like take priority as opposed to being the equivalent of they're having barking dogs chase Frisbees at halftime. Oh, wait, we're also going to release the college football playoff rankings during that. I think it's somewhere between 8 and 8:45 is what the college football playoff website says about when the rankings are coming out next Tuesday.
Oh, really? I thought the first one was usually like right at 7, like leading into like the first Maction games of the year. So now that's
what I thought.
Yeah.
I looked it up. I didn't make it up.
Is there basketball? Is that why?
I assume because why wouldn't the college football playoff rankings be anything other than halftime entertainment about non-conference basketball games that nobody cares about? No offense.
Yeah, that must be what it is.
Tuesday, November 4th, it says 8 p.m., but like I saw a thing that said between 8 and 8:45. And then like it gets back to 7 in some other weeks.
Oh, but the thing, like, yeah, the typical basketball thing that has the playoff rankings between it is not next Tuesday. Basketball does start next Monday, but yeah, I don't know. That's strange.
So anyway, we'll be on talking about what actually happened. We'll be giving our opinion about how all these things should unfold, what they got right, what they got wrong, right? I mean, that's what we want to do. And I do think it's fun, but it's also okay to be frustrated while you're having fun, right? Okay to be frustrated while you're having fun. That's I make my family wear those T-shirts on vacation. It's okay to be frustrated while you're having fun. So okay, maybe I read this wrong. It says 8-8:45. Maybe that means it will last from 8 until 8:45. I thought it meant that it was like it's going to come out sometime in there. So
it looks like the show starts at 8. Yeah.
Okay, so it's definitely at 8. Okay.
And then it leads into there is a basketball game at 8:45 on ESPN, so it'll lead into that.
Okay. And then the weeks after that, it's at 7, 8:30, 7, 7, and then obviously it's at noon on this Sunday, December 7th. So, okay. Hopefully we'll be done by like 8:16 to actually have.
Oh, I wonder if it's 8 o'clock because it's election night.
Oh. Yeah. Okay. Also, by the way, as we're electing like the leaders of the free world, tune in.
We're going to react live to that. Check in.
Yeah. Yeah. Did your levy pass? Bill Landis has an opinion about that. All right. So we'll see you guys next week for our playoff show. Join us with everything else we do here on the Bill and Doug Show. Try our Ohio State Substack if you want. Bill and Doug, OSU.substack.com. Like, subscribe, tell a friend about the Bill and Doug Show. For now, he's Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises. And that was the Bill and Doug Show.